Welcome to Dean's Discuss, a podcast that examines how science and research at UC Davis affect our everyday lives. Join our hosts, Allison Brashear, Dean of the UC Davis School of Medicine, and Michael Larimore, Dean of the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, as they give their thoughts on how the work of scientists, physicians, and researchers affects us all.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, hi, Allison. How you doing today?
Good. I think we're going to talk about herd immunity, and we'll let you tackle that definition because you're a veterinarian, so you know all about herds.
Well, yeah, I'll try. Herd immunity actually is a very interesting term. It actually was developed in veterinary medicine. There was a recent Lancet article which had a great review of the history of the term herd immunity. And it was really developed in the early 1900s, about 1918, when it was first documented in the literature. And it came about because of a big problem. And the problem was animals dying of diseases where they had no vaccines, they had no treatments for. And what they noticed is if they let that disease go through a herd and allowed the animals to develop the disease and had a devastating effect, those that survived actually the next year were immune from that disease. And you can apply it to lots of different things. West Nile virus is a good example. It swept through the country, infected a lot of birds in this country. And then the next year, it killed a lot of animals. The next year, it was immune in those birds and they survived. But that's now been applied, of course, to the current COVID pandemic. And the term herd immunity has been bantered about from policy to reality. And I think we need to talk a little bit more about that and why it's likely not a solution to COVID-19.
So in humans, my understanding is the theory is that it does just that. You allow something to kind of run rampant, untethered, and the survivors survive and become stronger and the weak don't survive, which I think is just a terrible, thousands more people would die. I think there's some countries, Sweden, that did that, and it sounded like it would work, but it didn't. Certainly, I'm very hopeful that we'll have a vaccine, but the idea that we would just not do anything certainly just is counterintuitive to everything that we kind of hold dear in this country.
Yeah, I really think it goes against public health,
Yes.
Policies, guideline, ethics. We can't do that because we do know that there are very safe and simple measures by which we can prevent the spread of an infection, like mask and physical distancing, and all of the things that we're trying to do here in California and beyond. But also we have to give us time, and the time is in the development of the vaccines and the development of therapeutics, and that does take time. It's happening in COVID at a record speed, of course. We have several vaccines that are in the stage 3 development, so that's exciting. But if you decided that we were going to let it go throughout the country, what would happen is all the vulnerable, the elderly, those with immune deficiencies, they would be particularly, it's all well and good for a young person to think that they're immune, but in fact, some young people have had devastating effects from COVID-19. We've even seen vascular diseases in children. So herd immunity is not likely to happen. Now, what immunity is a very important concept, and our natural immunity and our adapted immunity when we use vaccines, yes, totally. We understand that, but to absolutely do nothing is not an option.
Right. And so, the idea is, I think we step in with the things we've been doing, the masking, the social distancing, and then, the drugs and the vaccines, and we have to be very active. The idea that we're just going to gut through this is just very short-sighted. I think that's one of the things that if there's a good thing about any of this, it's teaching people about public health. It's teaching certainly our medical students about public health. And I think now the community knows so much more about vaccine and hygiene and how things are transmitted and what the CDC is and the NIH. And, it's made people hyper aware of these things and the importance of them. And certainly it's clear now that research is going to bring the change. It's not going to come just from wishful thinking.
Yeah, and I think that that's a real crux at a academic medical center, which we have the privilege to work for, really is about evidence-based science around what do we know. And so each patient we learn from, each time we have a disease like this, we learn from it. And we know a lot about coronaviruses, the class of viruses that cause COVID-19. So we know more about their structure and faster than any other virus in history. We know about all the types of strains that are infecting people. And using that knowledge together to try to create interventions then becomes a real national effort. And that's what's going on right now. One thing that we could have used is probably a more uniform public health response and policies that allowed a uniform application of some of the preventive measures, because we have a patchwork throughout our country in which different states, different regions, even within a state, have been allowed to make decisions. And some of those have been wrong decisions that have allowed spreading events to occur. And, if you have that, you're going to have some non-evidence-based things happen. We know this is an aerosol transmitted virus, for example. And if you ignore that, it's at your own peril. So the wearings of the mask until we get an immunity within a population. Now, hopefully with the vaccines, hopefully with enough people that have recovered from COVID, we will see a diminished pandemic, over time, and we will get through this, much as we've done with other things. So it can be more manageable. We've managed influenza, and it now has a vaccine. We have to adapt that every year, but we are able to control that with simple public health measures and a vaccine. And we'll get there with COVID, but it can't be just ignoring it and let it run rampant.
Right. So I think the take-home message here is that the problem can't be solved just by wishful thinking, can't be solved by herd immunity. It's really got to be solved by active processes, public health processes, which are the recommendations are masking, social distancing things, but then the recommendation will be vaccination, just like we've done with the flu. So before vaccination, I'm old enough to remember when people used to die of the flu, and now that doesn't happen nearly as much. It still happens quite a bit more than we would want, but with the vaccine, we've been able to intervene in the process. Otherwise, it was just it was terrible, and particularly for those vulnerable. And without processes in public health and strong institutions, the most vulnerable are going to be the ones that are going to be at risk for whatever disease we're talking about. And that vulnerability comes because they don't have the appropriate health care, or they don't have the appropriate places to live, or they have other comorbid conditions. And so, without strong public health, the most vulnerable are going to be at risk. And I think that's the onus is on us as people who are leaders in academic medicine, but also the onus is on our institutions to really make public health really strong. And if we haven't learned from this, I don't think, I hope we have.
Yeah, and really one of the things that I've been impressed with too is the cooperation between the university and the California Department of Public Health, the Yolo County Public Health, the Sacramento County Public Health. One of the things that it really takes also is teamwork to really understand what is happening within your location as well. And I think those partners have been tremendous in really looking at our situation regionally as well. So it takes both a combination of science and public policy and local officials to really come together and really combat this kind of disease. We're seeing it happening. We've seen a lower incidence in California, but as we have disruptions or people not paying attention to that, we will endure, especially with winter coming on. as people come maybe closer together in indoor spaces,
Right.
we might see an expected increase in cases of COVID. But having learned from the previous experiences, not relying upon herd immunity, but relying upon good public health measures, we can get through this. And hopefully early next year we'll be able to have a vaccine rollout. So that's what all of our faculty are really excited about, working on everything from the basic science of the virus to public health policy. I know it's incredible how our teams across both schools have operated.
It's been amazing. And I would add to the important thing about clear and constant communication. I think we can't over communicate. We've seen that nationally when we haven't had clear, constant communication. So that's one of the important things I think that's happened here, really making sure everybody knows kind of where we're at. And it's a time when the information can change quite a bit from week to week. So I think that's incredibly important.
A lot of misinformation out there as well.
Misinformation, yes. And
Know
my goodness.
Know your sources.
Yes, know your sources, and don't get all your information off social media. So it's so important. I think we've been able to really clearly articulate that herd immunity is not the way to go and shouldn't be embraced, and really is counterintuitive to our nation's values. And here at UC Davis, we're being very proactive. So this has been just a great conversation. It's always so good to talk with you, Michael. You just always have such a great insight, and it's wonderful to partner the vet school with the med school. I really enjoy these.
Thank you, Allison. And let's continue that teamwork next week as we tackle other subjects. We might want to pursue some of that, looking into how does science produce evidence, and why is evidence important? Why is the data important, and follow that up. So looking forward to our continuing conversation, Allison.
Yep, data is important. Thank you so much, Michael.
Take care.
Like what you heard or have an idea for a future episode? Email the deans with your suggestions at deansdiscuss@ucdavis.edu. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Deans Discuss Podcast is available free on demand at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon's TuneIn, Stitcher, Pandora, and Spotify. This is Deans Discuss.